I'm Frederick Gerten, and I'm the filmmaker.
And I'm Leilani Farha, and I'm the advocate.
Welcome back to PUSHBAck Talks. We've been doing quite a few now. I think this is could be episode 41. This is like our pandemic hobby. And Leilani, a few weeks ago, we talked about Ireland, remember, with Rory Hearn?
I do remember. And I've been following Ireland since. Some interesting things going on there. As a matter of fact, I learned that after our episode with Rory, a new community that had been built with homes that were meant for first-time home buyers has been purchased. About 135 of the 170 homes were purchased by Round Hill Capital, obviously some kind of asset management firm, some kind of international corporation, and they're turning those homes into rental accommodation that will be, of course, very expensive. But what's really interesting is it has sparked a huge outrage and movement. This is just outside of Dublin. And people are really demanding the right to housing and that the Constitution be opened up and the right to housing be included. So this one purchase has sparked a huge amount of energy.
I've seen it on Twitter. It's been, and there's a lot of personal stories coming out, personal experiences, and so it is cool that people start to be active and to fighting for their right to a dignified home. Really cool. A lot of people have been asking me over the years how I got to meet you, Leilani, and the secret is, of course, that it all went through Brazil. You know, it's in Brazil everything starts, and also how I met you. But let's take it from the beginning. I wanted to introduce you to, in 2015 I premiered a film called Bike versus Cars, and it's partly set in Sao Paulo. And here's a little scene from Bike versus Cars.
My name is Raquel Rolnik. I am an urban planner, professor for urban planning in the Faculty of Architecture and Urbanism of the University of São Paulo, Brazil. And I just hate to drive.
Watch it.
Oops.
Hello, Raquel. Welcome to PUSHBAck Talks, Raquel. It was, when I met you in Sao Paulo in 2013, you totally blew my mind. You, as always, you had very short time, but you delivered such amazing understanding of city planning. And you are a professor at the University of Sao Paulo, and you're still very active in, if I Google your name, you're like everywhere and involved in the Brazilian debate, but also in the international debate. And you were the predecessor of Leilani Farha as the UN Special Rapporteur of Adequate Housing. So actually it's true. And the film the Push is very much about financialization. And the first time I heard that expression was from you. So you are like the master of everything. So so cool to have you here and have you here together with Leilani. How did you meet the first times, Leilani and Raquel?
Raquel, how did we meet? I think we met online. Raquel was doing an amazing work on women and the right to housing. I think it's the first time we met. But of course, everyone knows Raquel, and her work was amazing as rapporteur and beyond.
Raquel, and just a few years ago, just before the pandemic, you released a new book called Urban Warfare, Housing Under the Empire of Finance. You're a leading voice in this global debate, Raquel, but you're also... We met in Sao Paulo now in 2019, just before the pandemic, where we had premiere of Push. And we talked about Push in the context of the Brazilian realities. How do you see that?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's a pleasure to be here. We are trying to get together in this podcast for months, I think. But yes, we are, the three of us, so much engaged
in the struggle for the right to housing that we don't have time to talk about that. So it's a pleasure to be here. And let's start by saying that we are living a global housing crisis. And of course, the global housing crisis has different expressions, different faces in different places. And let's start by seeing from São Paulo, from the periphery of capitalism, what's going on. And yes, we are seeing that the pandemic is, of course, this is everywhere, but it's especially true here in Brazil, where we combine the sanitary crisis with an economic crisis that was already there before the pandemic, and it was aggravated by the pandemic. A government that denies, first of all, denies the pandemic, denies the existence of the pandemic, a government that didn't really was not engaged in prevention of the pandemic, especially for the poor, with very much neoliberal approach to economy and development, which means that basically during this crisis, the government follows a austerity policy of not spending money in order to protect the most vulnerable. And one of the topics that people are suffering more here in São Paulo, in Brazil, and I could say also in many, many other countries in the periphery of capitalism, is housing. Why? Because, first of all, without money, there is a lot of people that don't have access to housing in the formal market, that do have access eventually to housing in informal market, including rental informal markets, and with the pandemic are not able to pay anymore, either pay for the mortgage, if there is a mortgage, for a small part of the population is true, because we had a big program here in Brazil of provision of housing through credit, My House, My Life program years ago, or it's unable to pay rent anymore. So what we are seeing is massive, again, a new wave of squatting land and buildings in a very precarious way, and a new wave of evictions because of this new wave of squatting buildings and land. And just to finish this picture, it's very important to point out that a very important movement, national movement, now it's truly national, zero evictions movement, Despejo Zero. It's very important because it's relating different groups, different organizations in different parts of the country in order to get a moratorium on evictions during the pandemic. And the movement have succeeded already to approve a law in the Congress, which is now under discussion in the Senate. But also,
wow, that's kind of a big victory.
Yeah, and also local state laws at the state level, because Brazil is a federation. So in São Paulo, for instance, also there is a law under discussion that was approved already, but needs sanction of the government. So, I mean, there is some victories. There is some victories in the judiciary. Some judges are being collaborating. It's very important, the role of public defenders that are part of the eviction campaign. So I think it's contradictory, but the good news is that as the example that you were giving about Ireland and Dublin, a very important. The issue of housing came into the political agenda, and a new wave of organizations around the right to housing are on the rise. And I can say that is also true for Argentina. That is also true for Chile, in which housing is a new topic in the constitution. So I think that it's coming again. At the same time, the new wave of financialization, which is through rent and rental housing, is just arriving also. The financialization of housing through rental housing is just landing here in São Paulo, in Santiago, Chile, in Mexico. So I think, again, we have the combination of all this process at the same time.
There is a lot cooking in Brazil and South America, and I've been a lot to Brazil and also, of course, in many other countries in South America. It's the social movements are really strong, and the alliance they have also with people like scholars at the universities and so on. It's very powerful, and it's amazing that they, during Bolsonaro administration, still can push through laws in the Senate. That's really cool.
A new generation of political representatives are being voted and getting into the Congress. It's a very small minority, but still it's a minority coming from social movements, coming from the peripheries, coming from low-income territories, popular territories, led by Black women from the favelas, from the peripheries, and this is it's also promising.
What I find also so inspiring from much of Latin America and what Raquel just described is the way in which social movements, grassroots movements, aren't afraid to be demanding new and better legislation. In North America, those are often quite separate activities. Over there, some lawyers and some people, some advocates are calling for legislation, but the grassroots movements are a little bit separate. I love this total combination because I think that's how you will. Well, and look, you already said you're having good effect with your zero evictions campaign, also through legislation, mobilization and legislation. I am interested to know, Raquel, what does the legislation say? Is it zero evictions forever? Is it for just the period of the pandemic and a few years afterward? Or how does it look?
The legislation is a suspension or a moratorium just during the worst months of the pandemic, in which the state of calamity is established by the government, the state of emergency, just for that and nothing else. Having said that, it's also very important to understand the relationship between social movements and legislation, and political movements and legislation in Brazil, because it's tricky. It's true from one side that since the late 70s, the movement for urban reform, which indeed, like Frederick has pointed out, brought together intellectual activists, social movements, researchers, lawyers, architects, urban professionals together in order to defend a new mode of building cities during the struggle against dictatorship in Brazil, and that succeed to insert into the constitution the right to housing and other progressive legislation. And from that point on, a very important movement around the renovation of the regulatory framework for cities through urban planning and other bylaws and legislation took place during decades. But it's important to say that now, if we do a balance of what having succeed with that, the balance is not that promising, because despite the fact that the Constitution affirms the right to housing, despite the fact that it's written there that the basic principle of urban planning is social function of property and social function of cities, that does not mean in practice a lot. That after so many years, I can say that it's much more a tool for social movements to struggle, including in the courts, than actually a tool that was mobilized by public policies in order to implement a very important change.
Yeah, it's like Amazonas. It keeps burning, even if it's not allowed.
It keeps burning. It keeps evictions out every day. Governments promote evictions. So you have this and I think that has to do also with the cultural tradition and legal tradition in Brazil, where legislation, I would say, is a reference. It's not something that you have to enforce. It's something there which is disputed in a very discretionary way. So powerful people can use that in their behalf. But having said that, it's not that it's useless. Of course not. Not at all. It's very important for the battles, and its social movement use that as one of the tactics and one of the tools. And of course, it's not the only one. And sometimes during the discussion of the last discussion of urban master plan in São Paulo, the housing movements have seized and squat the streets around the city council for 1 month in order to approve some new tools in the master plan, which after 5 years now, we are doing the best, were not implemented as well.
The struggle is ongoing, and it makes a difference. Leilani?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask a question, one more question about Bolsonaro and his impact on the informal settlements in particular, because when you're on the outside of Brazil and all I'm reading is The Guardian and news like this, what I've been hearing is the continued criminalization of informal settlements. I mean, there was the big case in Rio where the police went in. There was basically a massacre going after the drug lords, et cetera. And I'm just wondering, so that's what we're reading on the outside. Has there been more of this heavy-handed criminalization of informal settlements generally, or are we just hearing this one story and it's, I mean, obviously, at the best of times, in most countries, people living in informal settlements are treated often as encroachers, as you know, Raquel, land grabbers, as criminals, illegals, occupiers. I'm just wondering if Bolsonaro has really increased that perception, or not really.
That needs a more complex answer to that, because first of all, it's structural in the Brazilian urban development as well, that relates to Brazilian political structure, the fact that there is a ambiguity in regard to the existence and permanence of low-income settlement that I would to call popular territories, like favelas, like self-promoted housing, and their ambiguity in relation to the state. It's like that condemns those places to a state of permanent temporariness forever, because in one way it's very clear, according to planning rules, that this is illegal, this is informal, that cannot be there. But at the same time, politically, the continuation and urbanization and upgrading of those settlements, it's a very important political asset, which the whole political system uses in a very discretionary way in order that at the same time maintain the ambiguity and taking advantage from that, trading investments and permanence through votes, but at the same time maintaining the stigmatization of those places. The stigmatization of those places means for the political economy of the city, the demarcation of perimeters in the city where a parallel market and a parallel state can act. What is a parallel market? Is the drug dealing, smuggling, and other types of markets like that have license to act in these places, but at the same time, the violent and repressive face of the state, like death squads that are part of the police, that are part of the security system. It's a part of the state, but it's, I would say, the dark side of the state that can enter that and can enter that without respecting any laws in terms of, including the laws in terms of procedures. So what happened last week or 2 weeks ago, which is very, very common, is a police raid in a favela without respecting police procedures, which is taking the people that were dead and opening a process, a legal process, in order to judge them and then eventually condemn, go to prison. No, the police entered there shooting and eliminating the people. And this is very common. But again, this is very important also to say that the organization of favelas in Rio, they got, for the first time, I think, in the history, a agreement at the Supreme Court that those police raids were forbidden during the pandemic, and the government didn't respect that. Why Bolsonaro government is aggravating this situation? Because one part of the coalition that sustains Bolsonaro is the military, police, safety, and also private security forces coalition related to the idea that is very nice to arm guards in order to protect families, very similar to Trump and one of the parts that sustained Trump. So the fact that Bolsonaro, he is from Rio, his family is from Rio, and they are absolutely related. They belong to militia. They belong to death squads, the president itself and his family. So, of course, that reinforces that, but reinforces something that is structural. Is structural, is always there.
It's scary. I mean, Brazil is such a lovely country, and there's so many amazing people, and there is so many abilities and strength in Brazil, and then at the same time you have this violence that is and I would say that poverty is the worst violence that we see in Brazil, because the poverty is also very obvious. I was going to ask you something else, to both of you, because I think you've both been the UN Special Rapporteur on adequate housing. That's an experience you had 6 years out there traveling the world, looking into these issues. And now, I mean, Leilani, you stopped a year ago. Raquel, you stopped 7 years ago, but you're still talking about housing. So is this an issue you can't run away from? Is that like your destiny, both of you? How do you look back to your experience as the UN Special Rapporteurs?
No, let me just make a small amendment to your conclusion after my description of Brazil. I think that you have pointed out poverty as the main driver. I would point racism, because I think, and I don't think this is particular to Brazil. I think that we can read also you asked very clearly how much the neighborhoods, the projects, the places that are lived by Black communities, and not only in the U.S., but I would say non-white communities in many, many other places, are the object of discretionary policies and necropolitics in terms of not considering as human beings. And I think this is very, very important. And it's important to say that because I think that to bring the issue of racism on the table, when we are talking about housing and we are talking about urban, we have to talk about racism, because racism also structures the way cities are organized and segregated. But to respond to your question, long before I was rapporteur, I was involved already in housing. Because yes, housing is very important for urban. Housing and urban. Housing, normally 70% of the urban tissue is residential. So I think it's so central to the destiny of people. And at the same time, I used to say a lot when I was rapporteur that housing is not four walls and a roof over your head. Housing is a kind of a portal to other human rights, to other ways of living. So it's essential for life. That's why I think I am totally in the housing field and the right to housing field, but in this broad way. The years of being rapporteur were a privilege that they provide me a possibility of enlarging my view and have a global reading of the situation. I think that is very important because we are dealing with a global phenomenon. We cannot discuss housing in a particular city or country anymore. But I think that I will continue, and I am continuously engaged in this struggle. And I guess that Leilani the same, no?
Yeah, well, I've always done housing my entire working life. So as soon as I emerged from law school, one of the first places I worked was a housing and discrimination organization in Toronto. And from there, I actually spent time in Palestine. And at the time, the Palestinians were really not focused on social and economic rights and the right to housing. They were, of course, looking at their situation from a civil and political rights point of view. And I was there at a time when the right to housing was starting to get some currency. People were starting to talk about it, and it was so clear that the Palestinian struggle was also a right to housing struggle and a land struggle. And so that's how I actually got involved in the international side of things, and quickly learned that it has to be a really nice relationship between what happens at country level and the international level, a constant feeding back and forth between international and domestic. And then, of course, being rapporteur, well, I remember something Raquel told me. Raquel passed the baton to me in a very nice way. I went to Sao Paulo, visited with her, and she explained the role to me. But one of the things she said I will never forget, and Raquel, I don't know if you remember saying it to me, but it still makes me laugh. She said, 6 years as rapporteur, I've become so radical, I can barely stand myself. I totally understand what Raquel was getting at, because it gives you this opportunity to see all of the structural problems, all of them, and how deeply embedded in every society, discrimination, racism, all of the inequalities, So you become naturally quite radical. You have to. You have no choice. There's no other. It's like you reach consciousness. You can't pretend you didn't see.
And it pushes you towards a more critical way of dealing with that. And that had influenced a lot my own professional life, because for many, many years before being the rapporteur, I was involved in municipal management, also in public policy at state level, at national level. I was the national secretary for urban programs for the Ministry of Cities. So I was engaged in the institutional level trying to implement public policies, urban and housing policies. But after my mandate, I became much more critical on the limits and possibilities of working through the state and through public policies, and much more related to social movements and civil society movements. And because, I mean, the picture is so overwhelming, the discourse is so different from reality.
Yeah, it's cool. I mean, you were a part of my Bike versus Cars film, which is about almost like a lobby-driven city planning. So, and it's also this kind of, if you go and look into the global patterns, you will see it repeated over and over again. And it's the same with the housing situation. I mean, I think that's, it is what you two have been through. To see it from a global perspective makes it also clearer. You see the local picture clearer. And I think it helps the overall debate that's why it's so important that your voices are so important, that you keep going. And I think it's really cool, and it's really cool that we talk together again.
Yeah, and I was very, very, and I have to say that I was very, very grateful to Leilani because when I passed the baton to Leilani, she really got it. I mean, she really continued the work on financialization, which I think it was very, very, very important to do, something to do. And also the work that I started very, very, I involved a lot my mandate in communication. So this podcast and everything and the film and everything was a very meaningful effort from the part of Leilani and also with you, Frederick, in order to make all these things visible. Because yes, we are discussing in the Human Rights Council, everybody's sleeping there, nobody is paying attention. I mean, everything is caught in the geopolitical game, but still this content is very important for the people who are engaged on that. So I think that go beyond the sphere of the institutional sphere with the discussion is very important. And I was very glad that Leilani has done that in her mandate. And it was for my mandate a very, very important part of it.
Well, people, our listeners may not know that Raquel came into the position at the time of the global financial crisis. So she has like one of the most seminal reports on financialization and these big actors in 2008, I think it was, Raquel, this incredible report where in fact she calls for the paradigm shift that then we ran with in my mandate, this need to change our understanding of housing. Housing is so often just viewed as bricks and mortar and roofs and doorways rather than the deep tentacles it has to finance. I mean, I know Raquel is the same, that we end up talking about finance as much as we do anything when we're talking about housing these days. I actually wanted to put to you, Raquel, I don't know if you saw a couple of days ago, a report came out from the IMF, and it was analyzing housing in the European context. The IMF, the International Monetary Fund, for the listeners who don't know what the IMF is, setting financial policy globally, fiscal policy globally, very much involved the IMF in austerity measures in Europe post-global financial crisis. So the IMF has concluded that housing is unaffordable in Europe now. that renters can
big conclusion.
Yes, exactly. Big conclusion. Renters can no longer afford housing. And one of the things they say is that measures obviously need to be taken to deal with affordability. They don't name the actors who've created the unaffordability. They talk in very broad terms. One of the things
they are one of the actors themselves, you mean?
Exactly. Thank you, Frederick. That's perfect. One of the things, interestingly enough, they say is that all these vacant homes that are scattered around Europe should be taxed. And I find it so interesting. I'm just interested as well to hear, Raquel, your opinion on this, because we know that the IMF was part of this whole golden visas program throughout Europe in the countries that had austerity measures imposed on them. So Greece, Cyprus, Malta, I mean, there's many, Turkey. And of course, the golden visa program has contributed to empty homes. Financialization has contributed to dark towers and empty homes. So I found it interesting that the IMF has called for tax measures in this case. Do you think this is the IMF? Is it a mea culpa from the IMF? Is it?
No, I think that IMF has done as all and most of the multilateral agencies. First of all, multilateral agencies are crucial on promoting the financialization of housing everywhere. This is true in the first wave, the promotion of home ownership, the reform of housing financial systems, and the intervention in housing markets in that direction. Everywhere. And now again, in the second wave, we see all these multilateral agencies promoting a institutional, corporate new forms of rental housing everywhere. Again. So they are absolutely involved on that. The fact that the IMF is considering some of the problems that were caused is a good sign, but I don't believe at all that will bring a big shift in finance and in international finance, because I see what is going on in different countries promoting again in a different way. In a different form. I mean, the shifting from promoting home ownership into promoting rental housing and schemes through rental housing, it's a good example of that. But having said that, also the fact that the IMF is recognizing some pitfalls, it's important because it's a result of the work of a lot of people.
Like the two of you.
No, but not more people that are researching, organizing, fighting, struggling again. And I think it's very, very, very important.
I mean, I think there's a lot of hope. Raquel, give me a few sentences on why we should be hopeful.
I think the pandemic, despite being something very dystopic in our lives, is revealing basic structural problems in our ways to provide, I would say, building cities, building landscapes for rent-seeking landscapes, building cities and housing in order to provide new forms of extracting rent and interest from built space instead of building cities and housing in order to protect life. And I think that living the pandemic has shown the importance of ways of protecting and bringing public policies to protect life and around life. So I think that there is a very important dispute around reconstruction, because we have two ways now, two possibilities. We can do everything again, in the name of jobs, in the name of economic recovery, and we can do everything and all the errors again. Or we can learn from the pandemic, and I think it's a dispute that is being disputed in every city, in every nation around reconstruction. We can rethink the way we organize housing
and urban now. And it's a huge opportunity right now, because I think the fact that it has been lived so deeply in the lives of everybody.
We need a paradigm shift. And this is, Leilani, this is what you're working on.
It is. It's time. And I totally agree with Raquel's summary and sort of the positive possibility coming out of the pandemic, because now is the time. Everything's been exposed. Everything has been exposed in every society of how deeply unfair society is, deeply unequal. So I agree. We have a choice. Which road are we going to take?
So thank you, Raquel, for being on Pushback Talks. Leilani, it's kind of cool that we're flying around the world and meeting old friends.
Very cool.
Yeah.
It's always nice to be in conversation with Raquel.
Yeah, she's a very sharp mind. And when I was hanging out with her in Brazil for the Bike versus Cars films, and I mean, she can really, she's very focused in her way of explaining things. That's cool. Mm-hmm. So how do we fund Pushback Talks?
Yes, we need more numbers. We need more Patreons. You
so
can become a Patreon.
Yeah.
You can support us monthly with just a few dollars so that we can keep going and, produce this podcast. So the link is always on every episode of Pushback Talks, and you can click on it and quickly and easily become a supporter.
Yeah, and I could say to all supporters, the patrons we have, and to new patrons, that I will give you Bike versus Cars so you can watch Raquel. So if people who
nice
join the coming week, you will get Bike versus Cars for free. Is that fine?
Amazing. I love that, and it's such a good film.
It's fun. I mean, you will see Raquel driving cars in Sao Paulo, and that's like an experience.
It's the best part of the film.
But anyway, it's fun. It's good. I was checking the countries. It's like that's my little hobby,
yes.
And we are now up to 112 countries. We have people listening to Pushback Talks in 112 countries.
What's the new country, Frederick?
So what's the
Where
new
is
country?
It?
Yeah, it's Africa. And it's this time more east to the east, to like northeast. What could it be?
It could be Sudan.
It could be Sudan. It is Sudan. We already had South Sudan, so now we are all like now, and I know then that means that we have South Korea, that we now need to aim for North Korea.
Absolutely.
Yeah, but we don't have it yet. But it's still, if you have friends in North Korea, tell them to listen to Pushback Talks. We want them in the stats.
Yeah, it would be interesting. I have no idea actually what's happening with housing in North Korea. So maybe if we get a listener, they can enlighten us.
Yeah, we were both together in South Korea, and I've been there before. I actually went over the borders. I've been like at this kind of the UN spot at the DMZ. I've been there. So I walked into North Korea and I posed together with North Korean soldiers and so on. They didn't really smile, but I mean, I did it anyway.
I'm sure you did.
That's a long time ago. So it's...
I had an amazing experience in South Korea where I went to the highest court in South Korea, and there is on the court one seat that remains empty, and they're waiting for their North Korean friends to join them on the court. It's pretty cool. Yeah,
it's... we shouldn't go too deep into Korean politics, but it's, let's say, it's a lovely nation and it's lovely people and the food. My God,
the food.
But we should do a Korea episode, I think, because we have seen a lot there.
Definitely. See you next week.
Yeah, take care and be kind to the dog.
Always.
Don't walk too far.
No, that's good for him. That's being kind. Exercise.
Okay. Push him out. Ciao.
Bye, Frederick.
Take care. Bye.
Pushback Talks is produced by WG Film. To watch Push, visit pushthefilm.com. You can also support us by becoming a Patreon at patreon.com/pushbacktalks. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll see you again next week.